Lord of the Mysteries. Chapter 1090. Haunted Tales. Nighttime, Pritz Harbor, in a cemetery in the suburbs. The people who died in the airship bombings had been brought here. The priests and bishops of the three churches were busy comforting the souls of the dead to prevent any anomalies from happening. In that short day, many wives lost their husbands, many children lost their mothers, and many families were down to a single person. Some of them loitered in the cemetery, some silent, others sobbing. Some even wept until they fainted. Wearing an ordinary-looking face, Klein stood among them and watched everything without saying a word. It was as if he had recalled the funeral he had attended before. While it was dark, he had just used life's cane to treat the injured in Backland and Pritz Harbor's various hospitals, victims of the air raid. He had also left behind a strange and horrifying urban myth to help him further digest the bizarro sorcerer potion. And he knew that, once such haunted tales spread like wildfire, Zeradal, who was in Backland, would immediately be able to understand what was going on. He would send his marionettes to monitor the corresponding areas. Hence, before the news spread, he relied on teleporting to travel to all the hospitals in Backland and Pritz Harbor, leaving behind all sorts of horror stories to treat patients with severe illnesses. When this matter spread, he believed that he would receive a great deal of feedback, allowing him to take a firm and huge step in the direction of completely digesting the potion. However, Klein didn't stop there. The existence of a conspiracy created by the Red Angel evil spirit, and the fact that Zeradal was in Backland, was like a guillotine hanging above his head, urging him to continue searching for opportunities. Hence, he came here to witness the grief of the ordinary citizens. After a moment of silence, Klein retracted his gaze and turned to leave the cemetery. After arriving at an empty spot, his left glove quickly turned dark blue, and slippery fish scales grew out. With a whoosh, the wind swept over, and Klein flew up into the air towards the harbor. In the sea beyond the land, the Sonia Sea fleet from the Faysac Empire was quietly waiting. It was as if they were prepared to launch another bombardment after daybreak, destroying the rest of the shipyards. Soon, Klein arrived above the harbor ruins and looked at the faint flames in the dark night. At the same time, his two marionettes had used flaming jump to rush over from the ground, splitting up into different hidden locations. From what he had heard and seen, Klein didn't have any doubts or feelings towards what he was about to do. However, he was still confused. Taking revenge on the invaders was a legitimate matter, but if he were to seriously injure the Faysac fleet, the happiest person would be the lone king, George III, the true mastermind behind all of this, one of the culprits who had pushed for war. There are too many principles in this world, but only those who have truly experienced it will realize that there are times when doing nothing is the correct path. It will fill one's heart with conflict. With a sigh, Klein turned his attention to the information he had received from the hangman. The commander of the Sonia Sea fleet from the Faysac Empire was Admiral Igor Einhorn. He was a demigod from the royal family, currently a Sequence 4 iron-blooded knight of the Red Priest pathway. Through this information, together with the contents of the Red Priest card, more key points surfaced in Klein's mind. Iron-blooded knight can make women turn into men, and also make them have courage that is comparable to steel. Not only can they control multiple types of flames, but they're also masters in this domain. They can even turn their own flames into steel. On the Nepos, the flagship of the Faysac Empire's Sonia Sea fleet, a burly man with a thick beard more than 2 meters tall, Igor Einhorn, was sitting behind a desk. As he drank Sonia blood wine, he pondered over what to do next. After daybreak, Lone's airship crew will definitely attack. Their Pritz ironclad warship and the corresponding fleet will return soon. If they continue staying here, I'll be left in a passive situation. Although I'm an iron-blooded knight, allowing the entire fleet's power to gather onto me while distributing the damage, the commanding officer of the ironclad warship is most likely a demigod of the Arbiter pathway, or they have the corresponding Grade 1 sealed artifact, so it won't be easy to deal with them. If I'm not careful, they might be able to make use of the advantage of their fleet's speed and armaments. Retreating is the best option. After that, we'll continue attacking the coastal ports while the lone navy is damaged. Heh, this war is indeed a good opportunity to digest potions. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to become a war bishop before this. Otherwise, I might have a chance to advance to the level of an angel after the war. Sigh, only a war bishop can truly unleash the strength of an army. It's not like how I am right now, only able to focus power on myself. In the midst of Igor Einhorn's thoughts, he planned on using the hidden connection between an iron-blooded knight and the soldiers that were under his command to inform his adjutant to pay him a visit, so that he could give the orders of performing a retreat overnight. Suddenly, he looked up at the door. Thump! There was a knock on the door, and it instantly reverberated in the quiet room. An advance warning before an attack. This thought flashed across Igor's mind and he became extremely tense. In a battle between demigods, setting up an environment, sudden attacks, and catching enemies by surprise was a good way to seize the initiative. It was a combination that could effectively defeat, or even kill an enemy of the same level. On the contrary, it was very difficult to accomplish it successfully. Therefore, giving an advance notice before an attack was either a warning without any follow-ups, or it meant that the attacker's level and strength far exceeded the target. As a senior iron-blooded knight, Igor instinctively considered the worst situation. He immediately woke up every sailor and soldier on the Nepos to establish a connection with him. At that moment, the noise sounded again. Boom! This time, the knocking sound on the door was comparable to the loud boom of a salvo. It made Igor feel like a bomb had exploded in his ears. Under his high-strung nerves, he carefully listened to the commotion. This wasn't much different from the roar of a cataclysmic inter. In an instant, Igor's ears buzzed and he felt dizzy. He quickly spread out the damage and let every member of the Nepos hear a faint buzz. Then, Igor grabbed the fountain pen on the table and threw it at the door. This dark red fountain pen left afterimages along the way, like a cannonball that had been fired. To an iron-blooded knight, no matter how ordinary it was, it could become a terrifying murderous weapon through his augmentation. Boom! The door that was hit by the fountain pen cracked open, revealing the person in the corridor who had knocked on the door. It was a man in a black trench coat. His body was as thin as paper, and his face had no facial features. At that moment, the fountain pen had already exploded. The tiny fragments were like storms brought about by the sweeping of a machine gun. It embroiled the person who knocked on the door, tearing him into pieces of flesh and blood. Igor didn't relax. Instead, he stood up and looked around warily. He clearly knew that the person who had knocked on the door hadn't appeared. At this moment, the adjutant, whose bunk was diagonally across from him, opened the door and ran out. When he saw the flesh and blood on the ground, he said in surprise, "Admiral, what happened?" "There's an intruder." Before Igor could finish his sentence, his gaze suddenly froze on the adjutant. The adjutant retracted his gaze from the flesh and blood on the ground and slowly raised his head. There were no eyebrows, eyes, nose, or mouth on his face. It was the same as the person who had knocked just now, a featureless surface. Igor's heart palpitated, and his entire body ignited, transforming into flames that shot out in all directions. After the scarlet flames dispersed, they swept forward and surrounded the adjutant. The fire quickly spread, revealing the already charred adjutant. When the cold wind blew past, the adjutant collapsed into a pile of ashes. The flames didn't stop as they flew out of the room, one after another, forming a tall and burly Igor in midair. At that moment, he saw seagulls flying around him. All of them had a human head. Without any facial features, their heads bare. Igor let out a secret grunt as a blazing flame surrounded him before he sent towards the strange seagulls at high speeds. At that moment, he heard the sound of metal rubbing against each other, and immediately looked over with the help of the soldiers. When he saw this, his body suddenly turned cold. He couldn't help but feel a sense of horror. On one of the ships on the other sail-powered battleship of the Sonia Sea Fleet, the cannons seemed to come alive and had a life of their own. They turned around and aimed into the air. As for the cannonballs, they actively leaped into the cannons. Boom! 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 The moment these shells were fired, they were struck by fireballs that followed different trajectories, exploding prematurely mid-flight. Seizing this opportunity, Igor quickly recited the honorific name of the highest commander in the Sonia Sea Theater, a weather warlock from the royal family. The ruler of the fog of the battlefield, the symbol of weather flux, the totem of the storm and lightning, the great Awatoma Einhorn. This was also the reason why it was difficult to kill a demigod of the same level when an advance warning was given. They could always find an opportunity to seek help. Of course, the main goal of the attacker, Klein, was to create a bizarre scene to scare a demigod and help him digest his potion. He had no intention of completing the hunt. Upon seeing this, he hid beneath the water. Having achieved his goal, he immediately got Konas and Anani to swap locations over to him and teleport away with them. As for Igor, he didn't let his guard down. He remained extremely tense and guarded against any possible attacks. Only when the angel responded did he truly heave a sigh of relief. Following that, Igor didn't let the fleet stay any longer. He abandoned the sail-powered battleship that had turned into an urban myth, and he left those waters. After a while, a seagull flew over and landed on the sail-powered battleship that had regained its silence. The seagull had obvious dark eye circles. It looked around and said in the language of humans, "I can smell the aura of a seer demigod.